Hey, second graders. So we're back on my deck. It's a little less windy today, so hopefully you'll be able to hear me a little better. When we left off, our robot had just called into the night, "Animals of the island, you do not have to freeze. Join me in my lodge where it's safe and warm." So let's see who takes the invitation. Chapter 55, The Lodgers. Firelight spilled out from the nest and into the cold. A blustery night. Roz sat inside and listened to the wind, to the soft pops and crackles of the burning wood, and then the robot's keen hearing picked up another sound. Tiny steps crunching through the snow. "Roz, I'm freezing. Can I join you by the fire, please?" said a weak voice. Into the light crawled Chit Chat. The squirrel was shivering and clumps of ice stuck to her fur. When she finally felt the heat of the fire, she collapsed. Roz picked her up off the ground and gently placed her on the warm stone to let her sleep. An hour later, there were more footsteps, and a family of hares shuffled into the nest. They huddled around the corner without saying a word. Pinktail, the possum, was next to arrive. "Good evening," she mumbled, trying to sound cheerful. It's certainly been chilly." Swooper the owl hobbled in, followed by some chickadees and a magpie. Fink knew a good thing when he saw it, and the fox lay down right next to the fire. Then came Dig Down the groundhog. The fuzzy bandits carried an old turtle named Craig, who was in the worst shape of all. Creatures who should have been hibernating deep down underground had been roused by the vicious weather. Only the healthiest animals in the warmest homes were safe, and more weary animals appeared, and slowly the lodge filled up. This was the first time many of the lodgers had seen fire. They gazed at it with a mix of fear and hope. They could feel the fire's destructive power, but they could also feel its healing power as it warmed their bones. The lodgers seemed to push forward, eager to feel more warmth, and then pull back, afraid of feeling too much. It was important that the lodgers understood fire. So that's like an important part of the book. Think about fire and how it can heat up our food, it can heat up our homes. But we also know the destructive nature of fire. So Roz showed them how to build one. She showed the smaller animals how to arrange the kindling. She showed the bigger animals how to arrange the logs. Bumpkin, Lumpkin, and Rumpkin struck the firestones together. Everyone cheered when they managed to finally make a spark. As Roz looked around, she saw moles curling up beside an owl, a mouse snuggling between two weasels, hares nestling against a badger. Never before had the robot seen prey and predators so close and peaceful. But how long could this peace possibly last? "I propose a truce," said Roz. "Like the dawn truce. Everyone must agree not to hunt or harm one another while in my lodge." "Very well," said Swooper, after consulting his friends. "We hunters can control ourselves." "Then it is settled," said Roz. "My home is a safe place for all." One by one, the lodgers fell asleep. Even the nocturnal animals, usually awake at this hour, gave in to the coziness of the nest. The robot stood out of the way and quietly tended the fire as her guests slept through the night. Only when daylight was streaming through the door did the lodgers finally begin to stir. "You are all welcome to stay here as long as you like," said the robot as the animals rubbed their sleep from their eyes. "My home is your home." "Thanks a lot, Roz." Fink carefully stepped over a hare and a woodpecker on his way out the door. "I don't think I would have survived another night on my own. It's just too bad we can't cram a few more creatures in here." And the fox slipped outside. The robot looked down at the fur and feathers that now carpeted the floor. The nest had been completely full that night. If any more animals showed up, they'd be left out in the cold. But Roz was not about to let that happen. What do you guess is going to happen next? What do you think Roz is going to do? All right, I know what she's going to do. Yeah, I know she's going to build more lodges. Chapter 56, The New Lodges. The second lodge would have to be bigger than the first if it was going to fit Broadfoot, the bull moose. He was a towering hunk of an animal and had a thick coat of fur, but even he was struggling with the frigid temperatures. Broadfoot lived on the other side of the pond in the dense section of the forest that was home to many animals, most of whom were in desperate need of a good thaw. The winter days were short, so there was no time to waste, and rather than walking all the way around the pond, Roz tested its frozen surface to see if it was safe to cross. She threw a heavy rock high in the air and watched it bounce off the hard ice. Then she carefully walked over the ice into the forest on the other side of the pond. There she found Broadfoot waiting for her. The moose quietly led the robot to a clearing in the trees where the new lodge would go. Then Roz made a fire and watched as cold creatures began crawling out of the shadows. "Do not worry," the robot said to the growing crowd, steam puffing from their noses. "You will all be warm soon, but I need your help." Roz asked the animals to collect anything useful they could find: large stone, strong branches, chunks of frozen mud. With the robot's building expertise and a small army of helpers, construction of the second lodge didn't take long. The animals happily agreed to the robot's truce, and they shuffled into the warm wooden dome. "If you keep the fire alive, it will keep you alive," explained Roz as she dropped another log into the flame. "But be careful. Fire can turn deadly in an instant." At dawn, heavy snow was falling again, and there was Roz, setting out from the nest to build a third lodge. She trudged to the great meadow, where the fierce winds had created enormous sweeps of snowdrifts. But she powered through and finished the job. Soon, beginning work on a fourth lodge and a fifth, the island became dotted with lodges that all glowed warmly through the long winter nights. And inside, each animal laughed as they shared stories and cheered their good friend Roz. Chapter 57, The Fire. I guess we could have predicted eventually this was going to happen. Strange sounds were echoing from afar on the far side of the pond. What started as a low murmur gradually swelled into a chorus of terrified voices. There was an eerie glow in the part of the forest, and a thick plume of smoke began rising up from the snowy treetops. Roz charged against the ice and found the second lodge completely engulfed in a raging fire. Frightened animals were running in every direction, fleeing for their lives through the deep snow. "What happened?" shouted Roz as Broadfoot galloped wildly past. "We put too many logs on the fire pit," he said without stopping, "and flames climbed up to the ceiling. My baby's still inside there," cried a mother hare, pointing to the burning lodge. "Someone help, please." Roz didn't hesitate. She plowed through the snow and ducked into the lodge. Flames and smoke were everywhere. A tall stack of logs blazed in the fire pit, and in the far corner, a tiny ball of fur was shaking with fear. Crouching low, the robot wound her way beneath the smoke and around the flames and gently scooped up the young hare. "Do not worry," Roz yelled over the roaring fire. "You are going to be okay." She turned to leave, but the doorway had started to crumble. So she shielded the hare with her body and smashed right through the walls of the lodge. Sizzling pieces of wood went flying as the robot and the hare burst outside into the soft snow. "Oh, darling, you're all right," cried the mother hare, pulling her daughter close. "Thank you for saving my baby, Roz." Now that everyone is safely away, the robot turned her attention to putting out the fire. Her glowing eyes darted around as she computed a plan. Then, with all the strength in her legs, Roz launched herself high into the snowy branches to the nearest pine tree. And a moment later, the tree was shaking violently. Heaps of snow were sliding from its branches and pouring onto the flames like an avalanche. Steam hissed through the smothering mound of snow. Flames quickly died, the snow quickly melted, and within minutes all that remained was a charred foundation of the lodge. Roz dropped down from the tree and waited as the frightened animals slowly returned, and then she said, "Would you like another lodge?" The animals looked at one another, unsure of what to do. Understandably, they were afraid of another fire breaking out, but they were far more afraid of the deadly cold. What would you do? I'd probably give the lodge another try with some modifications. They pulled together, they worked with Roz, and they built a bigger, better lodge on top of the old one. It had a taller ceiling, a deeper fire pit, and it was made with more rock and less wood. It had a supply of water for emergencies, but the most important safety feature in this rebuilt lodge were the lodgers themselves, who now had a whole new respect for fire. Okay, boys and girls, we're going to end there for this segment. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the conversations that the lodgers are having. So imagine all of the animals in the forest hanging out in a lodge together. Birds, with, fox, mice, with things that eat mice like owls. So what do you think? There's a truce, so I hope it works out. Bye.